Okay friends, one of the first things we have to do to get started on the job is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheels are off the ground. After that, remove all of your lug nuts and then the wheel. Now that the wheel's off, the next thing we're going to do is carefully push back our caliper pistons. We're only going to do this a little bit, just enough so we'll be able to remove the caliper from the area. Just going to come right in here, carefully pry, and do the same right here. Just make sure it's got a little bit of movement, and now let's move along. Now the next thing we're going to do is remove our caliper mounting bolts. You'll find one here and one right up top. Just going to put that in a couple threads. There's the other one. Okay, now we're going to carefully remove the caliper, and then we're going to set it aside, making sure we put no pressure on our flex hose. Remove your rotor. Next, let's go ahead and remove our ABS wire. You're going to notice that it comes up along here to a couple mounting points. You want to, of course, disengage all those and then come right up here where it's attached. There's a little squeeze tab. You can squeeze on it and then remove it. Always inspect it. If you see any funny colors, make sure you take care of it. There we are. Now I'm just going to wrap this around this so it's as safe as possible. The next thing we're going to do is remove our outer tie rod end from the knuckle. Commonly there's going to be a locking clip on there. Just go ahead and get that out of the way. Remove the nut. I'm just going to put that nut on there, just a couple threads as safety precaution. The next thing that I want to do is hit right along this area with my hammer. I want to be very careful not to damage our outer tie rod end boot. Set this aside. Now let's come to the lower ball joint, remove the cotter pin, and then of course the nut. Leave that on just a couple threads. Now let's move up to the upper ball joint. Now we're going to move along to removing the pinch bolt that holds the upper ball joint to the knuckle. Hold the bolt, remove the nut. It's common for the pinch bolts to be stuck in this upper knuckle area here. Just give this a little twist, and then you're going to feel along the back there's like a little slotted area. Just spray some penetrant in there, up along where the bolt is as well. Take that mounting nut and just put it on the threads. That's going to help protect it. Use your hammer, give it a couple loving bonks just to break it free. Remove your axle nut. Use a hammer and punch, break this free. Just move right back down to the bottom here and make sure that your nut's on there just a little bit. After you're sure it's on there, we're going to come back up along the top and give it a couple loving bonks with our hammer. We just want to kind of break this free. Okay. Now with that broken free, we want to carefully let this come on down. As we do that, we want to be drawing the axle out of the wheel bearing. All right, now the next thing I want to do is tie the axle up and out of the way so we can get ready to remove the knuckle from the truck. Now we're going to move along to using our hammer. We're going to bonk right along this area of the knuckle and try to cause some vibration to break this free. Okay, let's get this out of the way. Let's spray this area with some penetrant. Remove your grease fitting. Now we're going to use some snap ring pliers. We're going to get right inside these holes right here and separate this so we can get it off. Watch your eyes when that comes off. Now it's going to be time to get the ball joint from the lower control arm. To do that, you could use a hammer and bonk along here and just drive it right out of there. Or of course, you can use a ball joint press. To do that, I'm going to use a cup on the bottom here, and then I'm going to use an adapter that has a hole for the stud to fit through. Slide it right up on there, along the top here. Now let's blast it out of here. With the ball joint out of there, you need to inspect the hole. Make sure it's not damaged in any way. By damaged, I mean it could potentially be stretched, or of course it might have corrosion or rot or anything the like that makes it so it looks like the ball joint won't stay in there. Let's go ahead and clean it right up, and then we'll grab our new ball joint. Okay, now it's time to install our brand new lower ball joint. Just go ahead and slide it in from the bottom. It should fit right in there. The next thing you're going to want is a cup that fits over the top here. We need an area that has a cup deep enough for the ball joint to come up and through so we can put on that locking clip. We'll just go ahead and slide that right over there. Now for the bottom, you want to make sure you have a cup that fits along the ridges of the ball joint. You want something that's going to go ahead and grab onto it and then help drive it straight up and in. We'll put that cup on there as well. Slide this over. Make sure everything's lined up. And drive it in. Now while it's still under pressure, you want to get under here and you want to inspect it. Make sure it's sitting perfectly. If it looks like it's a little off kilter, you can just go ahead and give it a couple loving bonks with this. That's going to help settle it in. Remove the tool. With the tool off of there, triple check everything. You want to ensure that it's sitting completely level. Look along the top here, and then of course, more importantly, down along the bottom. You want to make sure that it's sitting perfectly. If it isn't, you need to get back under there and reposition it. Assuming it looks good, let's go ahead and put on our locking clip. Now it's going to be time to get our knuckle back on there. I'm just going to slide it over the ball joint here. We'll start our nut on there, and then snug it up. Snug this up. Now we're just going to carefully jack up underneath our control arm. Just be careful because your jack could potentially slide out. Now with that jacked up, let's bring this up and slide the axle into the wheel bearing. Line up the control arm with the knuckle, slide it down and in. Put your pinch bolt in. Now let's get this back out from under here again. Snug this up. Now let's torque this upper ball joint to 46 foot-pounds. For the lower ball joint, you're going to torque that to 98 foot-pounds. Now once you have it torqued, the next thing you want to do is pay attention to the slots on the nut right here. Those need to line up with the hole that's through the stud of the ball joint. If it's not lined up, continue tightening until the very next slot does. Put in your locking cotter pin and pin it over. Now it's time for the outer tie rod end. Go ahead and slide it into the knuckle there. Start your nut on. Snug it. Torque it to 52 foot-pounds. Check to make sure that it's lined up for the cotter pin hole. If it isn't, just line it up and then put in your cotter pin. Now it's going to be time to run our ABS wire. That's just going to come up and along here, up along this, and then plug in right up there. Listen for a click, give it a nice tug. If it doesn't click in, you're going to find that you have an ABS light. Now we're just going to follow it along and start connecting in the clips. Look for the areas that look like this. Should fit right in. Lock it in, give it a wiggle. Do the same to them all. The next thing we're going to want to do is get the rotor back on there, but before we do that, you want to make sure you clean up the mating surfaces. You got the area along the bearing here, and then of course the back side of the rotor. You want to clean up any areas that might be raised on those. Once that's cleaned up, go ahead and slide your rotor on, and then hold it on with one of your lug nuts. Now let's grab our caliper with our 2 mounting bolts. We'll go ahead and slide this right over the rotor. Start in both of our mounting bolts with a little bit of red thread locker, snug them up, and then we'll torque them to 85 foot-pounds. Apply a little bit of red thread locker to the threads, start the washer on there, start the nut on. Now we're going to carefully snug this up, and then we'll torque it to manufacturer's specifications. With the axle nut bottomed out, the next thing that we need to do is torque this to 162 foot-pounds. To do this, you're probably going to find that this is going to want to spin on you. If that's the case, just take a bar and come straight across like this. Be very careful not to damage the threads. Okay, now it's going to be time to get the wheel back on here, but before you do that, just take a quick check and make sure that you resecured everything along the way. Assuming it looks good, let's get the wheel back up on. Now I'm going to start all the lug nuts on there, we'll snug them up, get the wheel back on the ground, and then we'll torque the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. Now with the tire on the ground so the wheel can't spin on us, we're going to torque these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Okay friends, we got it all put back together. What's left to do now? Go ahead and pump up your brake pedal, take it for a road test down to your local alignment shop.